Hello and welcome to Curator with a Camera. I'm Anthony Coulls, Senior Curator at the National Railway Museum, and today we're here in Station Hall at York to look at the Class 87 electric locomotive. On the West Coast Main Line from London to Glasgow, north of Lancaster, the gradients are steep and the curves are tortuous for express trains. Now, in the 1930s, the solution to that was the Duchess Pacific, the Princess Coronation. Fast forward several decades and the Class 87 is the answer, but it is only the final answer after other things had been tried. In the late 1950s, electrification was seen as the way forward for the modernisation plan, but it's expensive. So in the late 50s, the line was electrified as far as Crewe, and a new types of locomotives, electric locomotives taking their power from overhead cables down through traction motors, was created. The AL1 to AL5, later known as 81s to 86s. North of Crewe, the difficult track, the difficult terrain required more powerful machines, which the electrics couldn't necessarily do initially with the price. So diesel locos were used. Class 40s, the English Electric Type 4, and the Class 50s were used quite often double heading on the West Coast Main Line north to Carlisle and on into Scotland. But of course, two locomotives to do the work of one on the southern bits of the route, that's not really effective, it's not particularly efficient, and it's not particularly economic either. It doesn't make sense. So what the railway needed as electrification progressed further north was a locomotive that would have the performance of those existing electrics, particularly the Class 86, or what became the Class 86, but had that extra degree of power. And that is where the 87 came in. This locomotive was able to produce 5,000 horsepower compared to the 3,500 equivalent that the Class 86 could do. And it made sure that this machine, therefore, was ideal for that route north of Lancaster up to Carlisle and on to Glasgow over Shap and Beatuck summits. The Class 87s were constructed at Crewe. Their electrical equipment inside them was provided by GEC, and the first of them, this machine, 87001, rolled out of Crewe Works in March 1973, year before me. I didn't roll out of Crewe Works. The 87 settled down to run at 110 miles an hour maximum on the West Coast Main Line. That was 10 miles an hour more than the Class 86s. So these were the front runners of Scotch Expresses. In essence, really worthy successors to the Duchess Pacifics. Northern Powerhouses, if you will, but something that was very much part of the Northern Railway scene for the next 30 years. Let's have a quick walk around the outside of the 87. Pretty much on first inspection, a blue box, but still signs of its working life and hints as to what's going on inside. And here we are at the front of the loco. Well, it's double-ended, so it's got two cabs, so it can be driven from either end. And classic BR blue livery there with the yellow ends, the warning ends, and the BR logo on the side. The arrows of indecision, as some might say, but part of that, very much that corporate era, stamping BR's new identity from the 1960s through to privatisation. The front of the engine, two windscreen panels, mark it aside from the other electric locos that had gone before, the 81s through to the 86s, where they had three windows at the front. 87, very, very distinctive. But lots of modifications have happened on the front of this engine over the years. At the bottom there is a sealed marker light, high intensity lamp. Those weren't there when these engines were new. And there were previously other types of cables on the front, jumper cables to enable multiple working and push-pull working. These were replaced right towards the end of the loco's career with these TDM cables, which enabled the locos to work in multiple with other engines and also with driving van trailers for push-pull trains. Marker lights, red and white, red for the rear of the loco if it was operating on its own, or light engine, and white there at the front to denote forward motion. Footsteps, oleo buffers, the power cables going through from the loco through to the train. I've got a Mark II here, very much indicative of the type of trains that, or the type of carriages that the 87s would have worked with. But we walk down the outside of the engine past the cab. It's a Bobo wheel arrangement. That means it has two sets of bogies with two driven axles on. So there are four wheels, two axles on each bogie, and there they are. Coil springs on the wheel set, the Timken roller bearing on the side, and then more coil springs for the suspension of the locomotive body on top of the running gear as well. Quite plain sides. You can tell the state of the paintwork of this engine because there's our film crew. There's Sean, Lee, and Jay. Big shout out to them all. Get a wave there, guys. Your moment of glory, your moment of fame. The Class 87, the electric locos, they are different in terms of the technology to the steam and the diesels that we've looked at, in that they use their motors as regenerative braking as well. So when you're not driving the loco, you can actually use the power of the loco, of the motors, to slow the train down through braking resistances inside the loco. Now that means that you get very, very, very hot, because that energy that comes back through the motors is produced into heat, and therefore there are louvers on the side of the engine to allow that heat to dissipate. Various bits and pieces, battery boxes on the side, and here Stephenson, the nameplate. This locomotive, when it first came into service in 1973, was named Stephenson after our man himself. And the Stephenson Locomotive Society, SLS, were party to it. And that was how the locomotive remained with its name until 1976, when British Rail changed their naming policy and decided that the 87s were going to be the new Royal Scot class, as it were, and all the locomotives have names that had a resonance with the north of England. And therefore this engine lost its name Stephenson to 87101, the Thyrista locomotive that would have been 87036 but became 87101. So Stephenson was the name carried by the one-off machine. When that one-off loco was withdrawn, the Stephenson plate came back onto 87001 for the Stephenson Bicentenary, as you'll see there, and named by Porterbrook Leasing, who owned the loco, Virgin Trains, who operated the loco, and the Stephenson Locomotive Society. And there is the commemorative plaque underneath the nameplate, Stephenson Bicentenary, 1803-2003. Moving forward to the other end of the 87, it's pretty much the same, because this is a loco that is designed to operate just as well in both directions. So more grills up there, straight body side, window in the body side there to allow a bit of light as you walk through, and then cab steps, the data panel there, Class 87-0 as opposed to 101, which was Class 87-1. 80 tonnes, brake force tonnes, 40 electric train heating index, route availability 6, so that told you where it could and couldn't go. Maximum speed 110 miles an hour, which, as we said earlier, marked this aside from the 86s and the other locos that had gone before. Willesden, its home depot there, WN for Willesden, and then up cab steps there through into the cab. And on this end of the loco, 87001, its TOPS number. This is the number that it is allocated on the computer system so that the control and folks with the rail planners, train planners, know exactly where this engine is and what it's doing at all times. Before we go and have a look inside the 87, there's just a couple of differences on this side to bring your attention to. One of which is perhaps the most significant is the name here, Royal Scot. This is what 87001 was renamed to after it gave its previous name of Stephenson to 87101. And when it entered the National Collection in 2005, we felt it appropriate that it would carry a name on either side reflecting those two different parts of its story. On the platform level up here, we can see a couple of the higher up features on the loco. This orange line, which runs along the loco and onto the carriage, onto the Mark II behind, is called a cant line, and that denotes the safest height that you can really be underneath the electric wires. So above that line, you must not go if the locomotive or plasma rolling stock is underneath the overhead electric wires. Speaking of electric wires, what makes an electric engine operate? It is the juice, the overhead 25 kilovolts alternating current that is carried above the tracks that you'll see on most electrified main lines today. And there is the pantograph, which connects the locomotive to that overhead wire. It's down in the lowered position here at the moment. If the engine was operating, it would be extended and higher. And you can see that it is sprung and operated so that it maintains a steady contact with that overhead cable. You can't have jolts and bits where the power supply doesn't go through. And big ceramic insulators there, because 25 kV is a lot of juice. But here we are at the cab of the loco. Let's go and have a look inside. Here in the cab of 87001, we've got this great view. Let's just take a minute. This is Station Hall at NRM, at the National Railway Museum. And for the first time since the museum has been opened, we've actually got a view out of Station Hall, up the line, out towards Network Rail, which is an amazing place. It's actually really quite fun to be sitting here in the driver's seat, looking out along rail tracks, because quite often our stuff we're looking at another loco in front of us or something in the museum. But what have we got in front? So there are some very familiar pieces that you will recognise from other curators with the Canberra. When we've looked at the Class 31, we've looked at Coily the Deltic, we've looked at various other bits and pieces. So we start with, where do you begin? So there is a slot there for the master key to go in. I don't have a master key with me today, but that's where it goes in. This is our direction, this is our power handle, that's our straight air brake, and there is our train brake. There are other dials, brake pipes, speedo, ammeters for the traction motors, notch indicator for what the electric field is when you're driving, and various other bits, horn, windscreen wipers, anti-slip, pantograph up and pantograph down for the pantograph on the roof, and a few other bits and pieces, including a big red button here, which is the remote fire alarm. So it isn't the stop everything, but it's the big red button. But the thing that makes the Class 87 interesting is this control here. Now, we talk on locos like the Deltic and others about notch 1, notch 2, notch 3, notch 4. And that's fine when you've got a diesel engine that is able to respond and then builds up steadily. But this is an electric locomotive. It doesn't carry the power unit around with it like a diesel does. So what you need is smooth increase of power and smooth deceleration. So this is the power handle, which has 39 notches, which allow really smooth transmission of power. But also when you put the brake into the running position, if you take power off this then becomes that regenerative brake where the energy, the traction motors turn into brakes themselves. So it turns the motor into a generator, making electricity, which then is dissipated as heat through the brake exchanges, the brake equipment in the loco. So this becomes a brake handle as well. It's a little more technical than that. Do look it up on the internet, because it really is a fantastic piece of technology where you turn the power into the braking as well. So from the cab window, we've got the two windows looking outside, windscreen wipers clearly, a sun visor, light above the head, the allocation sticker there, this time for Wembley, WB, and then as we spin around, passing Lee, because I can't help it, but there you go, Lee, your moment of fame, the AWS isolation unit, so we can change onto the other end, the fire alarm, etc. And then the hidden world of the interior of the Class 87. Let's go and have a look. Right, well, this is the innards of the 87. Very different to some of the other locos that we've looked in. It's clearly very different to a steam loco, but very different to a diesel locomotive as well. As we said in the cab, this does not carry its power supply around with it. It takes it from a source above us, and the pantograph is right above us here. So there would be, in operating days, 25,000 volts up there. Nice glass fibre ceiling there, a bit of insulation, but everything surrounding me here has these labels on. Traction supply. Pantograph must be down and earthing switch locked off before proceeding beyond this cover, because behind these covers are some of the real high voltage bits that make the 87 operate. So behind some of these are the main rectifier. And what the rectifier does is it converts the alternating current from the transformer into direct current, which is then used in the traction motors to drive the locomotive along. A little bit further round also, we have other cabinets that include brake resistances. So there's a big bank of resistors inside the cupboard where that heat, that regenerated energy from the motors is transmitted up into those resistances and slows the loco down. And behind this very large covers on my left is the main transformer. So what that is doing is it is transforming the 25 kilovolts, 25,000 volts into lower voltage, which enables the locomotive to operate. And that transformer then supplies electricity to the rectifier. So it's still AC in here, alternating current, and it becomes direct current in the rectifier, which we passed a little earlier. And then down through this part of the loco, there's some fuses there. Look, still a little pen. That's quite amazing that remains. And under some of this, further braking resistances and also traction motor blowers. So these are air blowers which are blowing air over the traction motors, because clearly they get hot in operation, whether it's from the heat from driving the loco or from the regenerative brakes, and the loco requires traction motor blowers to keep them cool. So they are situated down beneath us, and then behind the cab door a few lamps which give you an indication of what's happening for fault finding. No plugging in of any diagnostics in here, and a little diagram there. TDM deconfiguration fault finding guide. Well, that's for the TDM, which is the cables at the front for operating through to other locos or driving van trailers. And I'm told by previous crews that this is where drivers may take a little comfort break on the long run over Shap, because there is no facilities provided. And then we're through into the other end of the loco with a second driving cab, exactly the same as the one that we've sat down and looked at in. Once again, major power handle, forward and reverse, starting key, and other bits and pieces like the cab to shore telephone there. There's a communication system here, press to call for the guard, and they're all locos. We know which end is which because you get number 1 and number 2 end. This is number 1 end, and that's perhaps the place to end our look inside the loco. That concludes our look around 87001, the locomotive with 2 names, very unusual in our collection, but very much the Northern Powerhouse for over 30 years on the West Coast Main Line. Thanks for joining us today for our look at the Class 87, a true Northern Powerhouse. If you've enjoyed our film today, Why not like and subscribe to the National Railway Museum channel so you don't miss out on future content?